Maxime. I'm a partner with Catalyst Fund, and we're indeed a climate tech focused investor in Africa, early stage. But today I'll be wearing a slightly different hat, one that's called Africa the Big Deal. It's a platform where we track startup funding across the continent since 2019. And I'll share a couple of figures with you. For some of you that know the platform, we have been sharing quite a lot of insights over the past year. Some of them are here. We'll not dig into all of this, but because we are basically on the point of moving one digit up, 2024 to 2025, we decided to look at 5 insights to talk about 2024. Maybe there'll be a couple of additional ones. Who in the room thought this was a very bad year for startup funding in Africa? By show of hand. Very bad year. Looking at the numbers, looking at how hard it's been with 2 hands here. It's been a very bad year for startup funding in Africa. Actually, the total amount of funding dropped by 33% as of October, if we compare year on year. And especially if we compare with the very busy 2021 and 2022. So quite a bad year. But was it really? If we look a little bit deeper and look at some context, actually the past year has not been that bad. As a matter of fact, 2024 has shown more funding than 2020. If we compare with years where things were a little bit more stable. The total amount of funding in the past 4 months has actually been the same as the same 4 months in 2023. And again, if we take a 10 years view, the amount of funding has actually increased by a factor of 77. So 77x. I mean, if this was a startup, it wouldn't be too bad of a multiple, right? So there are some reasons to still think this year wasn't that bad. And as a matter of fact, if we look at things with a 12 months rolling basis, the past 12 months were the first one to show year-on-year growth since June 2022. That's an early signal. That's an early signal, and maybe there's a way to tweak the data, but I think it's something that is interesting to look at. The past couple of months have been showing a little bit more growth, and definitely that's a sign of it. Another insight. Startup funding is much more spread geographically. I wish this was true. Unfortunately, it's not really been the case. 82% of the funding this year went to 4 markets, the big 4. So Egypt, Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa. And this has been pretty much stable over the past 5 years. So we're not there yet in terms of geographical spread. Another insight, unicorns are not for Africa. These are a couple of press articles from a couple of years ago saying that we are, while we wait for unicorns, maybe we could look at gazelle. There's been different wildlife names used to describe what startup could be. But as a matter of fact, we had a new unicorn this year. That's still pretty cool to celebrate, right? We have 8 unicorns across the continent. And the last one being Moneypoint from Nigeria. So maybe there are different forms of startups and animals that we can use to describe them across the continent, but we were still able to show that unicorns can be born and scale across the continent over the past couple of years. That's another thing that we have heard quite a bit. Sorry, the font is a bit strange here, but the deal size in Africa have dropped at all stage, pre-seed, seed, Series A, and Series B this year. But in reality, that's not really the case if we compare with the previous years. We look at pre-seed, it's only 20% lower than the average of previous years. Seed has been higher. Series A little bit lower, Series B a little bit higher. Some of you are, data crunchers will tell me it's better to look at median, so we looked at median. Oh, we don't have the data, but we looked at median. Sorry, that's the old presentation. And when you look at median, it's actually the same story. So pre-seed is actually even more equal to what it was the previous years. Seed is a little bit higher, Series A bit lower, and Series B is actually flat when you look at median. So deal size is very much comparable with the previous years. Here's another one I wish was true. Startup funding is more gender balanced. Here were a couple of press releases on some amazing startups that closed funding this year, led by fantastic female CEOs. I wish we could put a lot more on this slide. But unfortunately, startup funding is not more gender balanced. Only 5% of the funding this year went to female CEO-led startups. Everything you see in blue is basically just men. And that's been pretty much stable and the same kind of ratios for the past 5 years since we're tracking this data. So unfortunately, that's not the year where we can say startup funding is more gender balanced. I do believe we all have a role to play to change this. It's not gonna work if we just hope it will change. We need to be active. I'm proud to say that at Catalyst Fund, we have actually a target to back at least 40% female founders in our portfolio. Currently, out of 22 investments, we stand at 31%, so we're pretty much on track. Yes, it's, I think, everybody's role to act so that we can actually say in the coming years that startup funding across the continent is more gender balanced. FinTech is still dominating. $600 million of funding this year, and the biggest sector. But actually, if we look more closely, climate tech has been the leading sector this year. With actually it's $700 million as of November, and that represents 35% of the total amount of funding raised by startups so far. Very happy again here with the work we're doing at Catalyst Fund to drive this new trend. We have been able to build a portfolio of 22 companies across the continent, specifically in the climate adaptation space. Our latest investment was actually announced a couple of minutes ago, a startup called Enacol in Morocco. I think the founders are here actually today. And we'll definitely continue driving these efforts at pre-seed, seed, and Series A. There were almost no exits this year. That's another thing that I hear a lot of us complaining about. There's not been enough exit, there's not been any exits, not enough liquidity events, and so on. And I'm not going to lie, there hasn't been a ton of exits, but still, there's been a couple that we can definitely celebrate, and more than in the past year, actually. So 21 exits so far, including quite a few here in South Africa, like Cricket, for instance. So again, you know, something that we wish we would see a lot more, but still, compared to the previous years, is not as bad as we would have expected for the year. Just to finish, I like everybody else, you know, we use ChatGPT from time to time, so I thought, let's ask ChatGPT how much funding will be raised by startups in Africa in 2025. $8 to $10 billion. So this tells us two things. One, that there's a hope for a bigger number next year, and two, that ChatGPT is often wrong. It actually says it at the bottom here. ChatGPT can make mistakes, so here we have an example of that, and check important info. So for important data on the continent, better to check Africa the Big Deal than ChatGPT, I would say. That being said, let's see if that goes right. I would be really happy. And that's it, really. Thank you very much.